Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase, pricing, and availability questions regarding this watch. And regarding this watch, I have a confession to make. I can't be objective. This is one of my absolute grails. Launched in 2021 and historically driven by the 3448 and the 3450 Perpetual Calendars, this is the Patek Philippe 5236P-001. Now, it borrows its case form from those historical predecessors, but it has a dial that is driven by a number of Perpetual Calendar pocket watches made in the 20th century. So that's where the dial comes from. Now that we're up to speed, let's talk about the dimensions. In platinum, the watch is 41.3 millimeters in diameter. It's 11.2 millimeters thick, thanks to a micro rotor automatic. 48.5 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, with a fairly broad 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now on the wrist, I need to be clear, the strap is not broken in. It's super stiff, so it hasn't softened up at all. So when I tighten this down to my wrist, it's going to compress my wrist and create the impression of a bigger watch. Now make no mistake, it's a bigger watch than the aesthetically similar 5235. That's 40.5, this is 41.3. It's also a little bit broader from lug to lug, but you can see that the lugs are still well inboard to the edge of my wrist. This down the barrel shot is always the truest one. Over the top, you can see it, I'm showing you because you asked for it, but it always exaggerates the width of the watch. Now where it really wins is in profile, where you can easily see that with a thin construction and a sloped bezel, it slides easily underneath the cuff. Straps high grade, you can see large rectangular scale alligator leather with the scales symmetrical, so a very expensive high grade cut of the animal. You know you're looking at a modern day platinum Patek Philippe because they always put a top Vesselton diamond between the lugs to remind you. The strap is a very dark blue with a monotone stitch and a gloss finish, and on the bottom you could see it's calf skin. It's actually a brand new crimped, ungouged Patek Philippe factory strap, and it uses the company's current pull-tab spring bars, so you can pop that strap off the case without a tool. At Patek, they do things right, which means a platinum watch gets a platinum clasp. Believe it or not, some companies will give you white gold. So you can see the name of the maker as well as the city of origin. We have the Calatrava Cross, which is the symbol of the brand. And then we have this little radial spring that Patek Philippe uses to make their friction fit clasp just a little bit more tenacious, holding a bit tighter and more secure than a traditional friction fit clasp. Now, I mentioned the 3450 and the 3448. That is where this case design comes from. So we have these sharp angular lugs that almost taper to a point, a cylindrical case, and then a conical profile bezel. This is common to the 5235, but since we are talking about a perpetual calendar, you're going to note that there are some changes within the movement and on the dial. But the case form for the two is mostly identical, with the exception of the platinum perpetual getting that little diamond and being larger than the previous annual calendar 5235. There's the Calatrava Cross again, and although this is a unique multiple patent granted perpetual calendar system, fundamentally it still works like a traditional Patek Philippe calendar, where you have a program wheel, well, I should say perpetual calendar, where you have a program wheel, the grand lever, and those features creating a relatively broad perpetual calendar for which individual pushers are required to adjust the date, month, and the moon phase. So taking a look at all of that, we have a dial that features another element brought over from the 5235, though it's more subtle here. There is a vertical satination to the dial, so it does have a brushed directional grain to it. Maybe not easy to see on camera, but it's obvious when you see this in person. Now, there is a chemin de fer, or a railroad track outboard for the minutes. The hands, as well as the indices, are white gold and faceted for better contrast. White gold is used because over ages of wear and enjoyment, if a little bit of moisture gets in the case, that type of metal is not going to oxidize or tarnish, so it's going to keep your dial immaculate. Now, we've got a day-night indicator, so for example, if I want to know, am I looking at 9 p.m. or 9 a.m.? Because you don't want to use these little calendar adjusters at night. Well, you can look here. It's silver during the day, it's blue during the night. So if that little aperture is blue, don't use these adjusters to set the calendar. The moon phase, 122-year correction interval. Otherwise, you don't need to touch it. Perpetual calendar, you don't need to touch it until the year 2100. So leap years, irregular length months, no problem. The leap year cycle, 4 is the summer Olympic years. Just keep that in mind. and you are able to cycle through all of the displays and go around in circles without any hazard to the watch, because that's how Patek's system works. It is not like the IWC system. If you look carefully, you can see that those discs, there's actually 4 of them. There's 2 pairs of coaxial coplanar discs, so 4 discs total in the same plane, and it's an American-style calendar, which means you have the day, the date, and then the month. And there are a lot of historical Patek Philippe calendars that work like this, but they're all pocket watches. They're either perpetual calendar pocket watches or perpetual calendar minute repeater pocket watches. So if you want to search those separately, you can see where this design comes from. It's drawn from Patek Philippe's 20th century history. Also, note the seconds hand. This being a modern Patek Philippe movement, we do have hacking or stop seconds if you wish to set this watch to a reference time. One last quick note, you can see the discs are white, but the printing is blue, a lovely contrast that I deeply appreciate. Now on the reverse side, you could see that though a micro rotor automatic, this is not the old caliber 240, no, this is an all new construction that originally debuted in 2011 on the 5235G regulator. So this is the 31260. And like most Patek Philippe movements, it's a little bit of an alphabet soup, PSQL. So you have the small second, the perpetual calendar, and the moon phase. The base caliber is 31 millimeters, but the casing up diameter, including the dial side mechanism, is 34. So it's a nice big movement that properly fills this sizable modern case. Although it's a snapback case, it is water resistant to 30 meters. In practical terms, that means just splash and rain, don't swim with it. The movement has a 48-hour power reserve, and it has a 4 hertz beat rate. Unlike the 5235, which used some advanced research series silicon escapement components, this one still uses the anti-magnetic and thermally inert Spiromax 3rd generation hairspring, but it does not use the silicon escapement, so it can operate at a higher beat rate for potentially better accuracy. By the way, the different generations of the Spiromax hairspring, they all look the same to the eye, but the latest version is anti-magnetic, resistant to changing temperatures, and here's a big one, it breathes concentrically like an overcoil. Because of the micro profiling that's possible with deep reactive ion etching fabrication, it can be symmetrically weighted all the way around, so in any position it keeps equivalent time. It does not need a thick and cumbersome overcoil to achieve that. Now the movement here, I'll take a quick look. You can see it's adjusted in 6 positions, one more than the chronometer standard of 5. It pivots on 55 joules, but here's the money shot. The number that really astounds is that this movement has 500 plus pieces. I believe the number is 503 or 506. And all that means is that it's basically got as many parts as many grand complications do. And remember, a grand comp is a minute repeater, a chronograph, and a perpetual calendar. That's how complicated this is. Now, a couple of changes have been made from the version of this in the 5235. What looks like it might be a white gold micro rotor is actually platinum. So that has been changed from gold in order to create more winding force and efficiency. You can see it pivots on ceramic balls with steel races. It's called a hybrid ceramic bearing, but the use of platinum is to create greater winding efficiency. Now, the other thing that's present but not seen is that there is 20% more energy in the mainspring. So the mainspring is 20% stouter to be able to supply the energy necessary for a more power-intensive complication. So that's been done. Out of sight, out of mind, but very important. Also important, we have a free-sprung Gyromax style regulator. Now, Patek's been doing this for a long time, and while Gyromax has evolved, the fundamental idea dates to the late 40s. It was industrialized in the early 50s. These little eccentric screws on the rim of the balance, in pairs, they're moved in and out to change the polar moment or turning force that alters the timing. It allows for very precise adjustment in those 6 tested positions, and also greater shock resistance, since concussion to the watch can't change the timing of the watch. Now, in terms of architecture, I always loved this movement because unlike the 240, not only is it larger, but a few things have been done to make it aesthetically pleasing. So you can see the sweep down from the power source, ratchet wheel, center wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, escape wheel. It's got this little crescent off to the side with finger-style bridges for the terminal end of the drivetrain, like a beautiful Geneva pocket watch. And then we've got these broad stripes. Not every Patek Philippe watch has these super broad stripes, but they are distinctive of this caliber where it appears, and I like that look. Now, you might know that as of this year, 2024, Patek is attesting that its movements are accurate to no worse than -2 + 2 seconds per 24 hours. Now, previously, from 21, 22, and 23, these movements would have been guaranteed to -3 + 2. Rest assured, they can all run to the next highest tolerance that was introduced this year, 2024. Every single one of them is mechanically identical. Every single one of them can be made during service to run -1 + 2, so don't worry about that. There is no distinction year over year. They all have that potential. The watch is beautiful. As you can see, we have bevels that are broad and, while started mechanically, finished by hand. And the places where you can really see that more than anywhere else are places where the bevels come to a point. So you see the edge of this barrel bridge and then the edge of this winding system bridge. See how they come to nice tapered points? You can also see the same on the edges of the bridges at the edge of the movement. You can see that where the little finger bridges reach the edge of the movement, you have those tapered points. The fact that those bevels come to points and that the bevels don't roll over the top of the point indicate that somebody on a manual level is taking care of this and paying attention. So while it is undoubtedly started mechanically, it is finished manually, and you can see clear evidence of that. Now, what we don't have, sharp interior angles, but then again, we've got everything else in abundance, so I can't complain too much. Also present, satination on the wheels, several different sizes of overlapping perlage engine turning on the base plate, black polished screw heads with chamfered slots in circumference. In short, this watch is a rich dish, an absolute festival and a feast, and one of my personal favorites. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.